Welcome to the ManXChange podcast hosted by Coach Alfonso Short. Join him each week on Saturday mornings as he engages with his guests and they discuss men leading, boys thriving, and communities winning. The conversation is underway.
Good day to everyone and Happy New Year. My name is Alfonso Short. I'm the host of podcast ManXChange, and I really appreciate you taking part and taking some of your time to be a part of this podcast today. To explain to you ManXChange, my objective, is to inform and to empower young men and men that on the importance of being visible and encouraging to educate each other in our communities and also participating as active members of our communities. My mantra is that ManXChange be a safe community to be informed, to be heard, to be healed, to be honest, to be humble, and to be most of all transformed. That's a mouthful, but that's all in one nutshell, is that we just want to be true good men in our personal lives and to society. Today, my guest will be Mr. Marzelle Wallace. Hello, Mr. Marzelle Wallace. How you doing, sir?
Good afternoon, Coach Short. Thank you for having me involved. Thank you for reaching out. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, I really appreciate that you could participate. And I'd like for you to share a little bit about yourself, of where you're from, maybe your status, married, single, you have children, and then just a short synopsis of some of the things in outreach that you do for community and for you.
Well, man, originally I'm Marzelle Wallace, as you know, from Mobile, Alabama. Really from Pritchard, Alabama. Went to Viger High School, and from there I went on to Mississippi Valley State, then Florida State. I'm happily married to Miss Sonia Wallace, and I have two sons. I have a soon-to-be 15-year-old and a 12-year-old, two males. So man exchange is going on every day in my household. For 30 years, I operated in the federal space, but also I call myself a social entrepreneur. So, as they have the mantra in our community, we're Jamaicans, we always have our hands in a lot of things, but the main thing is that we believe in multiple streams of income. So I'm also the founder of Noble Financial Capital, a small boutique lending firm that focuses on healthcare, the healthcare space, and small businesses such as restaurants, you name it, engineering firms, just providing short-term capital. But over the last couple of years, Al, as you know, I've been actively involved in metropolitan community development. Right now, I'm serving in a dual capacity role right now. Um, but my main role is acting as the interim executive director. It's just a fancy title, but I'm a man who believes in getting in the weeds and working. You can't talk about doing something unless you're a doer.
Well, I know that as a fact, and I like to share with the community in itself that Mr. Marzelle is really extended family to my wife, Anissa, and I, because we met maybe 20, I've been married 27 years, and we met 2 years before that. And I think he was acquainted with Anissa through work maybe a year or two before that, if I'm not mistaken. So we're family, and he's our connection to our extension of going to Atlanta, going through Atlanta. He's our pit stop. His boys are our boys.
They
and,
are.
and really, I have a great respect for Marzelle. I have great respect for his family. And the main thing is that he's true to his word. He's a family man, and he's about the business of education with young men and with people overall. And that's what really inspires me through him and with him. And Marzelle, I'd like for you, if you would share some of your core values, so to say, in how you interact and some of the things you're involved with youth, or just with the empowerment of people in education and, as you say, economic growth and the wholeness of life, so to say.
Well, Al, we have many core values, that shape us and who we are. But I know that here on earth, we're required to make a difference. someone made a difference in my life, and I attribute that to what others consider to be success, but I consider as a life journey. And as a result of people contributing to my life, I have a responsibility to, to reach back. We all have human limitations, so we have some experiences as well as we have some uh, application and life challenges. And as we overcome them through mentorship, through partnerships, through others lending their helping hand to get us moving forward in our growth in life, we must take that and pass it on to the next generation. So when you say core values, my faith is my core value. Jesus modeled a way of life that we should all do. He did things by demonstrating. You know, he was not a religious person, he was a doer. So therefore, we must be doers. Education is very vital in our community. I know oftentimes we begin to talk about things as it relates to the 1900s, but as long as if we really look at history, African Americans have been doing things to make a difference in other people's lives as far as back in the 1800s. That's where my study picks up from, where we were coming together as a community, shaping what's needed throughout the community, whether it's emotionally, physically, psychologically, financially. We were the community, and as a result of us being the community, we have affected America, changed the way America does do things for eternity. Our impact will forever be before us. But now we are on a part in our time in this season that we must do to shape the next generation. What we're doing now is creating the message for tomorrow. Each generation must make a contribution. Right now, my responsibility in the life is to input into this generation so that one day their contribution will be their history mark. Their history mark. So right now, we're just serving. One thing I've learned, I say I'm a father first before I'm anything, but I'm a son. How can you be a great father without being a great son? How can I expect my sons to respect me as a man when I'm not a good son myself? And when we look at this generation of youth or children, they're teaching us, they're parenting us. You know what I'm saying? They're
Yes.
parenting us to remember to have that childlike spirit. They're parenting us and showing us never to give up. They're parenting us and challenging us to do what we say we're going to do. And one of the things that we said we're going to do is we're not going to leave them behind. And so we have a responsibility. So when you mention dealing with youth or even teaching, teaching on a collegiate level, I'm learning that you're a student, So when I'm talking to my sons, I'm talking to other youth, I'm learning a lesson within myself. So my core values are being shaped daily throughout my interaction with our fellow man, whether it's adults, politicians, leaders, but most of all, youth, because you know what? They remind me that I must humble myself.
Yes,
they
sir.
remind they remind me that I must be honest. I must be transparent. I must live what I speak. I must be a giver. We want something for this generation, but we have a responsibility to give to this generation. So core values, they're forever being shaped. They're always been aligned. I feel like I'm a student of life. I'm going to be a student for the rest of my life. I'm going to be one of those, as they say, adult learners, always in school, even though it may not be in the academic arena, but I'm going to be in some type of classroom, and the main classroom is a classroom of life.
Yes, yes, sir, and that's the truth. And the thing is that, and we've had hundreds of hours of communicating, whether in person or by phone, and life is a teachable moment. And as men, we have to keep ourselves open to learn from young people. Being a father, as you say, ManXChange is going on with you every day, and specifically because you have two young men and you have two very strong-minded, very strong-willed, very independent thinking young men who also are very disciplined and respectful young men to their parents and to other adults. And that's a pleasure to be around in itself. It helps me deal with other young kids when I'm talking to them now. I have something I can transfer to other young men their age with some of the community and outreach things that I'm doing. I know that you're constantly being pulled on through your community, whether it's church, whether it's being on boards or something with school or politics and whatever, whether you're pursuing some of these things or not, you obviously have made an impact in your community, in your area, that you're a person that's accountable. And obviously you're astute to what's going on and you care. And as you say, you're willing to make a difference by being the difference. You just need to know what's the platform, what and more or less, and we don't say this, what's the rules and regulations to the game? Because I'm in. Put me in, coach. That's it. You're that way with me. We're sharing with each other, learning and growing. And again, I spoke earlier to a gentleman. I spoke how, because he's a little younger than me, that, he'd call me Mr. Short, or I said, no, we're coaches. Coach Short, coach, Marzelle is my brother, and I have a brother now that I discovered some time ago, but he's no lesser than a brother to me. And I respect that. And the results that you get in working with people, whether young people, organizations, or adults, is phenomenal. And if you're willing to share a little bit, like Colonel Sanders, you can get the chicken, but you can't get the recipe. Share a little bit of the recipe with us of how you kind of go about setting up programs or trying to enhance what programs are doing with young people, because you have those young people in your household every day. So you hear things that they like, dislike, or wish someone was doing. So you can interject from hands-on experience with other people who we want to make rules and set the projection of where young people need to go. And sometimes we never listen to them to see where they want to go.
Well, I don't know if it's a recipe, as well as more so being passed down generationally. My grandfather, my uncles, and my uncles and other men around me were always reaching back to other young men or young ladies. They were always inputting and pouring into individuals. So that becomes a way of life. But right now, I need not tell you the challenges that we face as African Americans, or not even just African Americans, as a community as a whole, as minorities, our outlook on life, the Miseducation of Negro by Carter G. Woodson, and the understanding of how we need to educate the next generation. And as I realize the challenges that I face in the marketplace, it says our people perish for a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. It's not that we don't have the information, but it's how you play the game, how you use that. So what we try to do is just make a difference. We have several programs going on, as you're aware of, and they're going on all year. We have the Daniel Project, which is for our young men. We have the Be Beautiful project for our young ladies. And then we also have our Magnificent Mom programs to work with mothers. And then, right now we're working with Fathers Fight, getting in the lives of men to say, hey, fight for your marriages, fight for your community, fight for your profession, fight for your children. And also that Fathers Fight, the FF stands for Future Fathers and First Fathers. Me being a father, uh, my first son is, like I said, me and him was talking the other day. He said, you didn't know what to do. You did the best you can. And I'm still raising him, but there was no real manual, but I had to depend on those mentors or listen to other men talk about the challenges they face. But one of the challenges is that we face as men is like, hey, I'm gonna make sure my child do not experience what I went through. And in doing so, sometimes we operate out of fear. We operate out of emotions. We operate out of feelings. We operate out of panic. Whereas when you're in a child or a generation, God has already ordained the path we must follow. You know what I mean? Prayer is powerful, but prayer, it's really just speaking to God for Him to empower you to do the task. Prayer is not the miracle. Boom. No, God is empowering you because He's giving you a specific task, and He's already equipped you for that. And we need that reminder through prayer, to for our empowerment to go and do. So, we have the Be Different program right now, and our theme for this year is, being different, but teaching our youth how to be different. Each youth is very unique within themselves. We need not talk about clicks and ticks, TikTok, Snapchat, all the different platforms, Instagram, which are influencing our youth minds and our way of thinking. But we got to remind them to think. We got to remind them of who they are. We have to, help shape their identity, because if not, society will shape their identity.
That's
And,
true.
they're very impressionable. And so, we don't clip their wings, we just mount to flight, through conversations, through our leadership program, through our public speaking program. We also have summer camps. One of the things I was exposed to through the United States Army, through retired Major General Ron Johnson, the plethora of opportunities that exist that I did not know exist all over this country, colleges campus, high school campuses, corporate America. There are many opportunities that many youth do not have the opportunity of finding out about. It's not in their community, it's not spoken in their home, it's not spoken in their church. So my desire is to say, as I hear these things, make them available to, I would say, I don't want to never say underserved, underprivileged. I never want to say that. The unexposed,
Unexposed.
to,
Yes, sir.
to have those experiences, because what I'm finding is when you give them that experience, a light bulb turns on. I can't tell them go to college, go to college, go to college. But what I can do is put them on a plane and let's go take a walk on Howard campus. And let's just get involved in some of the program. And then the light comes on. I can't tell them uh, how to view the military, because there's so many stigmas going on as it relates to the military. But we can go on a visit to the United States Military Academy. We can go to Annapolis, you know what I'm saying? We can go to the Air Force Academy just to expose them, just to see things differently. I can't tell them uh, you should become the next vice president or chief of staff of Georgia Tech. But when I introduce them to an individual that looks like them, smells like them, and who comes from the same environment, the child began to, what God has already put into them, they start gravitating, towards that. I can't tell them you should be a doctor, because some are, they're wired differently. But when I put them in a room with doctors, and those doctors tell the challenges they face every day, and they look like them, and they say, hey, I have that same problem. I have that same fear that I overcome. It's something different. Or when I take my young ladies and say, hey, I want to sit you down with the mayor of Stonecrest, Jasmine Cobble, you know what I'm saying? It's like, what? You gonna hang out with the mayor? And she walks in, she just relax, she's gonna let them know what the latest tennis shoes she got on. She, she's not, she's just chilling. But then we begin to have a conversation about why, the challenges of how her student government life shaped her to become a mayor. And now we have a young mayor in Stockbridge, 22 years old, Clark Atlanta University, former student. Now he's a mayor of his city, of his hometown. This is happening all over the country. We hear a lot about AI. We've been involved in the AI space for the last 5 years. So as the language is being evolved, we have youth that are already being trained, and they're waiting on the language to be involved. Because one of our programs a couple of years ago, a dad called me and said, hey, you're not teaching my son anything. What did y'all do all day? And I said, did you ask your son? And he said, yeah, he didn't say much. And the young man, I'm gonna call his name Blake. He said, well, it was hard to explain because if I felt like someone shot me with a shotgun and blew my head off, and how can I explain something that the language does not exist? So that's before OpenAI. That's before you start hearing about chatbots. That's before you hear about Claude and Gemini. we had kids already operating in that space,
And
you
that's
know.
the thing that we speak of, Brother Marzelle, is that a lot of times children, we all learn from the environment that we're in. And sometimes the lack of understanding, knowledge, or exposure from the parent, it's only transferred to the child. And so they don't, I'm not saying this again negative, it's a fact. Many parents are great parents, providing, buying things, making sure they're safe, but they're the communication is, we can't keep having a adult child discussion because your child is only a child for a moment and they're maturing to different stages. We have to up our, and I'm not a parent, but I am around a lot of children for years. You have to up your conversation and you have to listen so that you learn their language because they know our language as adults. They've watched us. What they're doing that sometimes frustrates us as adults, as parents, they got it from you or someone in the circle. And like as you
Well,
said, when you expose someone, say, I want you to be a doctor, it's not have a seen a doctor. What is a doctor? Is just an ordinary individual like you who has what's your interest? The interest is in this, so you can study this. And life is not about just, I know you do too. There are many great kids and people who made good grades in school and can't think their way out of the bottom of a wet paper bag. Because the thing is to learn to think and to know, be assured that individuals, whether they're youth, your family members, or whoever that you're exposing yourself to, one of the main subjects and topics and teachings is that we learn to think and we respect that we think differently and we can agree to disagree on things like that.
you know, one of the things when you talk about parenting, and you are, because I call you Uncle Al, and as long as I've known you and Anissa, you always have been around kids. You know, I need not say how the kids jump into bed and just have a conversation. I still so, you know, you're a father of many nations. You know, you're touching so many individuals. But when you mention parenting, and you know, I'm a parent. You know, and working with youth, I've had to repent. I had to humble myself. I've had found myself saying, I am sorry because of what I did not know, and realizing at times uh, provided more harm than help. But I had to realize that I had to stop leaning to my own understanding and seek guidance on how to nurture the next generation. And you know, it's an ongoing lesson learned. You know, it's
Yes,
always, you know
yes,
what I'm saying. But several years ago, we were away on vacation, and this guy was just kept staring at my son, and you know, we're in this phobia age, you know what I'm saying, and I'm wondering like what's going on, you know. And my son like, jump in the pool, dad, but I'm really trying to pay attention to my surroundings, you know, of what's going on. And then finally the guy walked over to me and we began to talk, and he says, how old is your son? And I told him the age. And then he began to say, you have this many more birthdays. You have this many more Christmas. You have this many more Thanksgiving. You have this many New Year's celebration. And it began for me that did something into me. It showed me how time is so limited. You know what I mean? Time waits on no one. And so we are always waiting on the right opportunity at the right time to do something. Time doesn't wait on you, you know. Time is not patient with you or I. We must do something with our time that we have been given on this earth, and we must steward. We're called to be stewards. So as parents, we're called to steward the next generation. I've been involved in mentoring and after school programs for, man, over 37 years, you know, some type of involvement. My first job was the Boys and Girls Club, you know, involved in the YMCA, serving on their boards, you know, the Make a Wish Foundation. And, you know, I began to see things that began to prick my heart to, one, count my blessings, you know,
yes, yes.
also to realize that you think you have challenges, or you think you have problems, you realize that, hey, you're not special. Someone is overcoming a challenge that's greater than the challenge that you're facing. So what we tried to do is, you know, early mentoring older kids, had to realize we needed to go younger. So that's when the Daniel Project birthed out of that, realizing the shortcomings of education and then realizing the difference in education. It's really true, it's really true. Some are more exposed than others. So we came out of COVID and we started the Daniel Project. We brought in teachers, and we instead of working with teenagers, we went with the youngest child possible. We said, hey, let's start with them right in kindergarten, and let's work with them, and let's take 2 weeks out of the year. We brought 2 weeks out of the year, and in those 2 weeks of the year, with true commitment of the teachers that we brought on for the summer. We paid them better than what they were being paid that's during the school year, so they were motivated. And then give them a environment where the canvas was blank, and then shape these young men's lives. And we had a great time. And now we're seeing the results of those test scores. You know what I'm saying? So our kids who are leading our program are in some of the better schools in the city. They're in the magnet program. They're involved in Jack and Jill, the Links program. They're all over the place, and that's the blessing. And then when you look at the book of Daniel, and I want to bring this up, and I don't mean to preach, but in the book of Daniel, it's mentioned a couple of boys, but we must talk about it. All the young men was taken from that community. All
Yeah.
of them were taken and put into an environment that was totally different from what they were used to. They were put things before their eyes. You know what I mean? Uh, you know that they had never seen. They were challenged in what was in their DNA. You know what I'm saying? To believe and change. But those young men, they were taught in a certain way, and they became 10 times better. And by doing that, we realized, hey, you look at the scripture, we must shape our young men the same way, our young ladies the same way. I mean, we got Daniels, we got Esther's, we got Nehemiah. I could go along with that, but we're seeing that we have to do something different. And I know we don't have much time, but I'm launching some new programs. But Al recently we sponsored an event called Grinchmas, and it was a lady by the name of Pearl Span. Uh, she says, I want to do something different. And she watched the show Grinchman, and she realized that the Grinch heart was 2 times smaller. And she was like, whoa, and that bothered her. And she says, yes, because of the things, the challenges that the Grinch was life. And I said, let's compare that to a child was facing. That heart was hardened. It was small. It was what we call now congested heart failure. All the challenges. But when you put love into that heart, kindness, direction, the heart grew to what it was meant to be. And so, in sponsoring Grinchmas, we sponsored 66 families, single mothers. We identified those who had recently overcome some challenges, and they're in a part of the year where they want to make a difference in their child's life. And so through support and sponsorship, we were able to give those individuals some love. It wasn't about the toys. It
And
wasn't about
that's the
that.
bottom line. Everything we speak of, everything that where I work from the bottom of my heart, it's about love, and it's about the agape love and the genuine love that I don't have to fake you out and be nice to you because I'm trying to have a transaction with you. We all need it. It doesn't have a color. It
No,
doesn't have an
no,
ethnicity. It's a
no.
it's humanity in its at its best. Love is, and until we can grasp that as individuals, young, old alike, then we will always have a gap in how we communicate. And communication is the key. Love definitely is most important, but communication is the key. And we have to open our doors, which is our mind, and open our hearts as individuals. And definitely when we become leaders and becoming men, as you speak of Daniel, where the young men, young boys was put into strange environment where we can say, act like a man now. No, you learn to become a man. You learn to
Well,
become.
one of the things you said was open our heart. I mentioned earlier about the Grinchmas event, and I thought I was doing something, but something was being done to me. There's a young guy named Chase. He was on our list, and we work with community partners who help us identify where the need is. You know what I mean? And our community partners are our civic leaders, our Parks and Recs individuals who are working with families and after school programs, our teachers. But this, for sake of privacy, this young man named Chase found out that Chase was sleeping in school every day, and he had some challenges, and the teachers were talking about it, and the mom, shared that with one of our community partners. And in a conversation with Chase, and it just blew my mind, he says, "Yeah, I don't sleep much at night because we're currently living in a shelter, and I stay up at night to make sure that no one touches my mom." Chase is 10 years old, does not know his father, but he have a DNA of the Father God to know to protect, and he's
Yes.
staying up at night. So when we're at the Grinchmas event, Chase gave me the biggest hug, and we're stepping into his life for the rest of the year or whatever. But Chase provided the biggest smile, the biggest hug. Everything was thank you. You know what I'm saying? As we made him the Grinch pancake, it was thank you. And he taught me something. There's another young man for, just for the privacy, I'm gonna say Frank. Frank, family just moved to the area. Him and his mom, single, uh, 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 not familiar with the culture and the climate of here, just happy. But kids can be mean. If you don't have the latest and greatest, they'll challenge you. But despite Frank being challenged by his peers, he always smiled. And so we got through a community partner, we said, let's show him some love. Let's show him some VIP experience, let him know that he knows celebrity as well. Let him know we can get on the phone and he can speak to whoever he needs to speak to. And that's one of the things we have partnerships with leaders who get on the phone that could change a young man's life. You know what I'm
It makes
saying?
a
Or
difference.
or invite him to an event or courtside. You know, but Frank, had some, how we joning about shoes and clothing. So they were joning about his clothes. So we made a call, and all right, Frank won't have that problem anymore. And someone, a donor, contributed 5 pairs of nice shoes to him. And let me tell you what Frank did. He said, "Oh, thank you." But as he took his shoes off, he went over to the rec center to the box that we had of resources to serve other individuals. He says, "I need to go put my shoes over here." We say, "No, put on these shoes first." Now, before he put on his brand new J's, he took those shoes off, left his J's there to go put them in the box to serve somebody else.
Yeah, we have to be
That,
appreciative, and we don't know what people. When we say people, and we look at what a parent going through, and not to harp on hard times or social statuses, economic statuses, that the children have to endure these things too. And most of the time, the parents or whoever the people in authority of them are doing the best they can. But we have to listen and be able to communicate with these young people, because again, they're not young people, but so long, then they become
oh,
middle age, young adults or middle aged people who they have so many scars and bruises on them, and they don't know how to communicate nor how to navigate through that. Now, you've shared the plethora of things that you're involved in, and we could go on
oh
forever
yeah,
without a doubt. I think you've shared enough to my community, because this is what I want to do as ManXChange, is to we collaborate and we share what's going on in our worlds and how we're trying to make a difference, and things that you said earlier, you're a lifetime learner and teacher, that we can learn from each other, we can collaborate with each other, and possibly no matter where we are in the US or abroad, when we're connected to this community, we may be able to connect and find ways that we can help each other with what we're doing or glean. And because my goal is that we create this and it expands uh, into the lives of many men and young men, into families and communities. I don't want to go on all your time, except we're going to talk after this for a second, but then we're going to talk after this forever.
Oh, yeah.
And we will be continuing this. You have shared information that's definitely mind blowing to me, and I get to have this all the time, but you're being blessed with more responsibilities and you're stepping up and learning what it takes to do that. And you're surrounded by those who realize if you say, I need help, they find out how they can help you and embrace and support what you're doing for success, because you're a man of success. You're a family man of success. You're a husband. You're a brother. I know you have your own family, but you're a brother and you're a family member to both me and Anissa, and we cherish you, wholeheartedly, brother. And you helping me with this interview with you and podcast. I know it's going to expand because you're going to share some things with me. Hey, bring these topics and issues up, and it will happen. And you may end up being the one that's handling that for me. Who knows? But we're going to grow. So I want to thank you. But what I want to do in closing is that you share some information on how you can be contacted through some of your platforms, those that you care to share.
Oh man, I'm an open book. You can contact me through Metropolitan Community Development. I'll share that email with you, Metro MCD at gmail.com. That's one way. You can reach me as Marzelle.Wallace at noblefinancialcapital.com. Or guess what? I'm an open book. Just give me a call, 445-428-4450. We're going to check the message before we answer the call and make sure it's the right call. But we are available, and so much has been learned from you, man. And some conversations you have shared are shaping our next program. And just as I close, your golfing instruction has led a young man to move into golfing, which is leading to a college scholarship for him.
That's great.
You have already blessed one person
God
and many
bless.
more. But I just wanted to share that with you.
Yes. Well, that's a blessing to hear, and it may be encouragement for me to pick my clubs up or get some clubs to play again. My wife said,
Hint.
I did retire from the game, but it's in my mind. It's in my heart always was to be able to learn something and share with others, whether it was youth or whoever adults who wanted to play. So for me, that's a confirmation that I got to get up and do something.
I had to throw a punch in there, but hey, I know we didn't have much time, but I wanted to throw that in there.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And again, I want to thank our fans today, or the community who took time to listen to our podcast. Hopefully it enlighten your life. And again, ManXChange, we want to not only survive, we want to thrive. We plan to lead, and we plan to win all the time.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right, have a great day.